evening and welcome to Face to Face for the Newsfirst team. I'm Niresh Aliyatambi. A month ago, former President of South Africa, Thabo Mbeki, was in Sri Lanka at the invitation of the Capital Maharaja Group, and among the many people that he met and imparted his wisdom to were the President of Sri Lanka, Anurakumara Dissanayake, and many of the members of the cabinet. And he also met various other captains of industry, youth leaders, and so on. But the one message that he consistently repeated to all these people that he met was that Sri Lanka, if we are to be a proper developed nation in the future, that we need to build a Sri Lankan identity. These are words of wisdom coming from a man, President Thabo Mbeki, who had fought for decades in the struggle to overthrow apartheid. And actually, when his party, the African National Congress, under Nelson Mandela, took over the mantle of leadership, they decided that they, as a responsible party, would build this South African identity. And in the same way, he said Sri Lanka needs to build a Sri Lankan identity. Now, where are we in this process of building a Sri Lankan identity? And to discuss this, I have with me this evening Dr. Jehan Perera, who is, of course, the Executive Director of the National Peace Council. Good evening and welcome back to the show, Jehan.
Good evening, Niresh.
Right, Jehan, where are we on our nation building, our what we call reconciliation, which seems like a big word, but in the end we are trying to build that one Sri Lankan identity. Where are we with this? What needs to be done? Because it is now many years since the war ended and we don't seem to have made a lot of progress.
Well, Niresh, I think we are much better than we were in 1948 when we got independence. In 1948, there was a lot of expectations, positive expectations about Sri Lanka. The departing British saw us as the sort of jewel in their crown. I mean, we were a country that had great potential. We were referred to as possible Switzerland of the East. But it did not turn out that way. And I think one of the main reasons for that was that we were unable to unite as a people. And in 1948, if we go back to 1948, what happened? One of the first decisions that the leaders of our country made was that they decided to exclude one community, the Tamils of Indian origin. They said they were not our people. They should be sent back to Britain. We did not ask them to come. The British brought them. The British are leaving. So now let them go. And they were denied their citizenship in Parliament, after debate, after discussing, despite the protests of the minorities, including the Tamils of Indian origin. They were denied their citizenship. So we see that right at the beginning, there was no unity in our country. There was, in a sense, distaste, a desire to get rid of a section of our people. Now, we again saw this in the 1960s. In the 1960s, one of the great government agents of our time, Neville Jayavira, he wrote in his book that when he was sent to Jaffna as the government agent, he was told by the then Minister of Justice, or the minister in charge of such appointments, that he should control the people of the North. Today we don't have that. So we have come a great distance. Today we have a government that is committed, publicly committed to non-racism. And there is no sense of the minorities, the ethnic minorities, being menaced by the government. In 1948, they were menaced because part of them lost their citizenship. They were targeted and lost their citizenship. In the 1960s, we have it on a government agent's word, a very top public servant, that he had been asked to go and control the people of the North because they were seen as maybe not entirely a part of the country, or they needed to be suppressed. Then we, of course, had the incidents of July 1983. What happened started on 23rd July and then continued for an entire week. A total polarization in the country, in Colombo, in other parts of the country, where the Tamils were seen as a threat or that they needed to be suppressed again. So we have overcome that. We are now at a different stage in our evolution. That is something to be happy about. But I must also say that sometimes, this is at one level, at the visible level. Visibly, we know that there is no tension. Foreigner tourists coming to our country will see a country at peace. Most of us see a country at peace. We see, if you go out into the towns of the country, the capital city, you will see people working together, friendly, no tension. We don't feel tension. But there's a saying in the peace building arena, in the peace building field, we say that peace is not only the absence of war or violence. Peace is more than that. Peace is when people feel engaged with one another and they feel a sense of belonging. Now on that, I think there is a ways to go. Even with this government which is committed to non-racism, which is not menacing the ethnic minorities, which won the vote of the minority, of the Tamils and Muslims at both the presidential and the general election in a great way. But there is a sense of anguish, I would say, in those among the ethnic minorities who think about these things.
Now,
yes.
Jehan, what you said really struck me. Peace is not just the absence of war. And we have had the absence of war, fortunately, for some time now. But have we done enough to build peace? And again, I'm reminded of what President Thabo Mbeki said. He said, you need to build a Sri Lankan identity. Now, one thing that you and I were discussing before the program is Sri Lankans, we still tend to judge our fellow Sri Lankans of where were you born, which part of the country. It's one of those things where, oh, you're from Sri Lanka, you're from Colombo or Kandy or from the south. And then if you say from the south, well, which part? Is it Galle or Hambantota? The Sinhala saying, Bentaraganging Iha or Meha. And this goes for upcountry. Are you from Kandy town? Are you from the Balangoda side? Are you from Matale? In Jaffna, again, are you from the Jaffna town or one of the other areas, from the islands perhaps? So we are trying to sort of say, okay, you are an important Sri Lankan, but you are not, you're a less important Sri Lankan. Now, we don't do this when we meet a foreigner. Oh, you're from the UK, lovely. We don't care whether he or she is from London or Liverpool or Norfolk. It doesn't matter. Oh, you're from the USA. Great. we might ask which part of the US, because we might have a relative there. Oh, you're from New York. My cousin also lives in New York. But if the person says he's from Alabama, it doesn't matter to us as Sri Lankans that he's out in the boonies of the US. The same if you're from Russia. Oh, that's lovely. But why is it that we tend to sort of separate out our Sri Lankanness into these regional issues? And it goes deeper. What school did you go to is one of those things. Of course, you get that in other countries as well. In the UK, if you've been to Oxford or Cambridge or Eton, you are considered a cut above the rest. And the same goes in the US. If you've been to Harvard or Yale, fine. But here in Sri Lanka, it goes a lot deeper. Why can't we build this Sri Lankanness?
Well, I think we all like to feel special. And so we find some way to be special and better than someone else. I mean, that's, I suppose, human nature. It is a nature that, say, our great religious teachers tried to wean us away from when they said it's not by birth that you become a good person, but by acts that you become good, and that you should be valued by that. So that is a matter of individual evolution and identity. But what can facilitate a Sri Lankan identity, I think, is that the system we live in, the constitution, the laws, the mechanisms, the state must treat everyone equally. There must be equality embedded in the law, in the rule of law, so that everyone knows that they will be treated fairly and justly. There will be no discrimination against people. So for that, we need to have a system of laws that is implemented fairly and justly, so that everyone feels equally protected. That is one aspect of it, equal protection by the law, by the state, by the institutions, mechanisms of the state. But there's also a second element. Because the first element, I think, is coming. We are having it. And this government is committed to that, I believe. But there's a second element, and that's where we have to develop, move forward. And that is that we should all participate in the running of the country, in determining what this country is. We should, in other words, participate in decision making. This country is multi-ethnic and multi-religious. When we make decisions about this country, about our lives, it should be made together. It's like a family, in a family, if the father alone makes the decisions, sometimes they may be sound decisions, good decisions, but the others in the family may not agree or may not want to go along with it. A family decision is much stronger if the family makes it. Let's sit together jointly and decide where we go for a holiday, how do we spend our money, what do we need a new car or not. You decide together. Same in our country. We need to decide together, but the way our present system of government is constituted, we don't have to decide together. The ethnic majority can decide by itself, because the ethnic majority is 75% of the population. And so it is possible that governments are formed where the leadership, the top leadership, is all from one group. And the other groups are not really included. Now that one group may, if good people, they may sincerely believe that they are taking decisions in the interests of everyone. But it is like the husband in a loving family thinking that he can make the decision for everyone. And that because he cares for everyone, for everyone's interest. But oftentimes we will find that his wife doesn't agree at all with how he thinks. That what he thinks is the right thing to do, wife doesn't agree. And children also may not be agreeing. So it's the same in our country, that when decisions are made, there should be multi-ethnic participation in governance. That is something we need to work on. Our society has not worked on it. And it is because of this that we, in a way, went to 30 years of armed conflict. And even before that, before the armed conflict, from 1948 on, there were bitter disagreements, where it was possible, because of the way our government is constituted, for the ethnic majority to make the decisions, which the ethnic minorities didn't agree with, or thought were wrong or discriminatory against them. We saw it even very recently, as recently as the COVID epidemic. When at that time, when there was much fear, we didn't know what COVID was, very dangerous, and the government, to protect the people, decided that if anyone died of COVID, that the body should be cremated. And most of us went along with it, that if someone you love died, you can't really go and see, and the body will be cremated, and maybe you won't even see it, the body, or you can't get close to it. Most of us agreed, but for our Muslims, it was not correct. It was against their religion, against the teachings, their teachings, but it was imposed on them. And in the end, it turns out that that decision was not right also, because even at that time, there was debate about it, because nowhere else in the world, hardly any other country was forcibly cremating the COVID dead, and they were also dealing with the COVID problem, sometimes even better than us. So there again we see the importance of deciding together. When we decide together, then people will feel they belong to this country. And when they feel a belonging, that they are participating in the decision making, and when the laws treat them fairly, equally, justly, like they do now, but the decision making is not together, then we will have the Sri Lankan identity that we have been seeking for.
Now, Jehan, you spoke a lot about the law and the judiciary, the justice system, and you're correct. I mean, if any citizen of this country goes before the Supreme Court, you can be very confident, or the Court of Appeal, you can be very confident of getting justice. But for practical purposes, everyday practical purposes, we need more than that. We need, for example, when you walk into a police station, if Sinhala is not your mother tongue, you need to be treated as a Sri Lankan, and as the police department itself has mandated, there should be a police officer who can take your statement, whether it's in Tamil or English, that has to be there. It's part of the policy. The police department has said so. But in practical terms, does this happen? Not, there are always excuses. I mean, it's not just about language. For example, it has taken decades to get police stations to accept the fact that women victims or complainants need to be treated differently, that there needs to be a proper women's desk. It can't just be, just another desk with a female police officer. It has to be, they have to be trained properly. And children, how the children should be treated, the whole environment of the police station. So these are practical things which we still haven't moved along on. And how do we build a Sri Lankan identity if half the population, let's say the women, don't feel confident in going to a police station or going alone to a government office, to your Pradesh Sabha? There are these practical issues. And unfortunately, the fact that the power is centered in Colombo is another issue, isn't it? I mean, if you want to get a passport, where do you have to go? If you're from Monaragala or Betiklo or Jaffna, you've still got to come here. So don't we have these practical considerations which we don't seem to be putting our thinking caps on for and trying to sort out?
Yes, I mean, now that you're right. I mean, all the things that you pointed out are because we don't give enough priority to them. It is true that it's difficult to find translators, but if you...
What have we tried?
Yeah,
have we really tried?
That's exactly the point. If we really want, then we offer translators greater incentive, greater incentives to join the translation service. We pay them better. We have courses for them, university courses. So that prioritizing is not taking place. And with regard to the issue of, the police desks and women not being there at the police desks, which are meant for women and children, again, maybe the reason is that there are hardly any women in decision-making positions at that level. There's a need for more women to make decisions. If women were making decisions, they will see that those police positions are staffed by women, because they feel it, because they have gone through the harassment and whatnot by being women. So I think that therefore, so this is the issue again, the issue of participating in decision making. And that's why some countries have quotas for women. We also have now at the local government level, we have 25% quota. That's a positive thing. We need to have quotas, I think, at all levels, till women are able to actually, till our society is properly conditioned enough to actually vote for women of their own volition, like happens in the Scandinavian countries. In the Scandinavian countries, women are at the highest level. They are prime minister, presidents. They are 50% of their cabinets are women, without quotas at this time. But even some of them started with quotas. They also started with quotas, and then the society changed as a result, and now you don't need the quotas. And if you look at it, the Scandinavian countries are among the most advanced, the best countries, most peaceful, and highest standard of living. They don't go trying to dominate the rest of the world. So because there's a large percentage of women in their government. So I think even we are now on that path, but we have some distance to go.
I think we need to take a short commercial break now. I'm in conversation with Dr. Jehan Perera, who is, of course, the Executive Director of the National Peace Council. Don't go away, we'll be right back.
GDP around $30,000 billion, 30,000, but in Sri Lankan context, we are just only 80 billions.
And one of the economic principle also say, with the trade, everybody better off.
Now, why he has reduced 44 to 30? That's what my point is all about, right? He's not playing kind of a trade game with us.
Now only the government, we are seeing that the provincial council election has completed and the people are appointed, but now only the infrastructure projects are being, the money is being deployed.
Face the Nation every Wednesday at 9:30 p.m. on TV1.
With your name, your unique talent, your phone number. To Sri Lanka's Got Talent PO Box 100 Ratmalana or WhatsApp us on 076 599 7788.
Chamatkara Ratriya, an enchanting night awaits. A tribute to timeless legends, a celebration of melodies that echo through generations. A heartfelt homage to two icons who defined the soundscape of a nation. Victor Ratnayaka and Priya Suryasena. Their songs shaped our stories. Their voices touched our souls.
Join us for a night of unforgettable performances by Jehan Perera, මුතු පින්න තාම හීතලයි වගේ
Samita Mudunkotua
මගේ විතරමයි ඔබ දැන්
Sanka Dine
යන අයතින් අල්ලා නවත්තන්නට බෑ
Raini Charuka Nadimal Perera Lakshita Suryasena Irushi Suryasena
Chamatkara Rathriya, where legends live again. Musical direction by the brilliant Mahesh Nenipitiya. Every note will carry the soul of a legend. Mark your calendars for the 2nd of August from 6:30 p.m. onwards at the Muses College Auditorium. Tickets via theticketsministry.com. Don't miss the most heart-touching musical event of the year. Chamatkara Rathriya.
Welcome back to Face to Face. I am with Dr. Jehan Perera, Executive Director of the National Peace Council. Now, Jehan, we were talking about inclusivity in governance, in everyday life, where the minorities, women, everybody needs to participate. And you brought up an interesting point of quotas, that quotas are required when there is stark inequality in order to give that little push to get things started in the right direction. Later on, once the natural balance is achieved, you can remove the quota. So where you now have Scandinavian countries which have 50% of the MPs are women, you don't need to have a quota. It happens naturally. They've reached that equilibrium. But in Sri Lanka, have we really taken that inclusivity in politics far enough? Now, you mentioned the 25% quota for the local government, but in Parliament, we don't have that. So even today, this Parliament, of course, has twice as many female MPs as the last Parliament, but it's still abysmal. It's something like 13%.
9%.
Yes. So it's very low, isn't it? How do we encourage it up to that 50%? And when I say quota for women, I mean this naturally includes, you will have more minority MPs, you will have more differently abled MPs. Now, there's a big hue and cry over the fact that there's one differently abled MP in Parliament now, but why just one, and why is it such a special case? It shouldn't be that way. So this participatory, inclusive democracy, how do we build it?
Well, I think we have to, one thing, that it has to come from the top. The top leadership also must be also convinced, but also pressure from below. And unfortunately, in our country, we don't have so many organizations, women's organizations, which have the resources to push for these changes to take place. But it is something that now we are talking about it now, and others also must take on these tasks, these challenges, because when you look at the world, looking at countries that have done well, you find that that is in not all countries, but in Northern Europe, you have this phenomenon. But there are other countries where women don't have such a good position, but also advanced in terms of economic development. So it's not as if, you know, it's something compulsory for prosperity, but I think for being a good society, I think having more women would be good, because they bring another aspect of life into decision making. They are more conscious of the need to nurture, to look after, to protect than men, perhaps because of the way they also look after their families. But it's when you think of this quota thing, it's also important where ethnicity is concerned, because, for instance, now in the public service, this is pointed out by those who are Tamil and Muslim, that there is a dearth of officers who are from the ethnic minorities. Even in the courts, sometimes at the higher levels, you find that a disproportionately low amount of Tamils and Muslims. So I think we have to keep this in mind. It's in the police force, for instance, certainly the military, it's disproportionately low, but also in the public service. And my friends who live in the north and east, they point out, for instance, in the east, that maybe there has been a certain policy because the ethnic minorities were not seen as entirely safe for some, because of the separatist war for so long and all, that if you look at Ampara district, which is a majority Tamil speaking district, and Trincomalee district, a majority Tamil speaking district again, but they have never had a government agent or the district secretary being from the Tamil or Muslim community. So this is something that we need to think of. And also, if you look at the administrative services in the north and east, the higher level, generally there's a disproportionate number of Sinhalese compared to the population, the ethnic ratio in those districts. So these are not things maybe we particularly like to discuss too much, and because it brings the issue of ethnic inequality, and so sometimes maybe even I know my Tamil friends who live in Colombo, they also say no problem, that there is no problem and now we must develop the country. But I also get feedback from the north and east saying that it's not so, that in a way sometimes the reason that the Tamils and Muslims, sometimes they don't protest is because they feel it's no point protesting, so best is to just focus on getting a good job and all leaving the country. Of course, now a lot of people want to leave, even Sinhalese want to leave the country because of the economic difficulties we are having. But these are things that we need to discuss more, and there must be more discussion about this, and the government also needs to take more leadership in this, in the area of power sharing. Now, one instrument of power sharing, which again is very controversial because people say these are white elephants, the provincial councils. The provincial council system is non-functional. Now, for the last, from I think 2018, the provincial councils are not functioning. They are controlled by the governor. The governor is appointed by the president. There are no elected representatives in that. Now, if the provincial council system was actually working, then you would find that in the north and the east, where the majority of people are Tamil speaking, you will find representatives elected by the people who will have some power.
And who are answerable to the people.
Exactly. And then there will be a greater sense of belonging, that they are also decision making. Of course, there are problems in the provincial council. They are not adequately resourced. They are not given enough money. So then most of the money goes on the administration of the provincial council, but to do development work, not much money. So then also not much power given to the provincial council. So then we turn around and they are white elephants. But then the decisions are made from Colombo. Should they be?
But again, that's a very good point, because Colombo is 250 kilometers away from Batiklo, from Jaffna, or maybe perhaps even further. And how often do ministers, cabinet ministers, who are based in Colombo, how often would they travel to Jaffna? To, for example, if you are the Minister of Health or the Minister of Justice, the Minister of Transport, how often would those ministers actually get out there? Not very often. Of course, when there is an election campaign, they would go there, but that's not their job. That's not part of their duty. That's something else for their party. But during the normal course of work, I don't see a lot of ministers going out there because, it's a long way, which is why the provincial councils are important, don't you think? Where, if you have a problem with local transport, bus transport in Mullaitivu, you just can't be, dealing with Colombo, the transport minister in Colombo. You need to have a provincial transport minister who can sort things out. And not the governor. Everyone can't be running to the governor's office. That doesn't make sense. So don't you think we need these are the last elections which are pending after all. Don't you think we need this as soon as possible?
I think we need to have this. It's part of our constitution also, and not having these elections is in a way a violation of our constitution. Our constitution has been violated also in terms of the provincial council system, because in the provincial council, land and police powers are also devolved to the provinces. But right from the beginning, that has not happened, in violation actually of the constitution. Of course, at that time it was justified that there was a war going on and LTT was around. But now the war is over, 16 years. It's time now that we reassess the system and improve it. And then, of course, comes the argument that these are waste of Sri Lanka, small country. You don't need to have multiple 3 tiers of government.
But you do. The practical situation is that if we had highways and high-speed railways where a minister could get on the train, and be in Jaffna or Batticaloa within, say, 3 hours, then that's fine. But it takes a lot longer. Again, it is simply that we haven't developed the country to that point. Perhaps in the future you can govern from Colombo, but practically speaking, you can't. We've seen this for decades. It just doesn't work. How often do the ministers get to Monaragala? They don't. That's the sad truth of it.
Yes, the people in Monaragala know best the resources they have, the problems they have, and what needs to be done. We should not think that only people in Colombo know best what people in Monaragala should be doing.
Absolutely. The farmer in Monaragala knows a lot more about the ground situation as it is today, drought and so on, than the Minister of Agriculture in Colombo, I would think.
Yes. So it's a matter also of investing. See, when you say it's a waste that may be inefficient, but then think of the inefficiency of conflict. When there is conflict, when there is unhappiness, when there is rebellion, how much more money is lost? When there is no real unity, national unity, how much more? So we need to invest. The provincial council system came into being to resolve the ethnic conflict, because we had a war at that time. It came to resolve that problem, and to bring about a situation where the Tamil and Muslim people feel that they have some power in this country, where they are a majority in those areas. They are a majority. They can form an administration, a government, a provincial government which has power, and then they feel a sense of belonging, ownership in the decisions that are made. Of course, it costs money, but it costs money to run that system. But perhaps if we had that unity, we will be developing much faster. We will be earning much more, because we won't be wasting our money on police and army and having conflict and frightening away the foreign investors. Foreign investors didn't come to our country for many years, because one reason being the conflicts that were there, the instability. Of course, another reason is the corruption, which is being dealt with, I believe, by this government.
A lot better than the governments of the past, which actually encourage corruption. Now, let's look at, okay, we've been looking at the present scenario and looking forward, because it's always easier to bring about reconciliation and national integration and build that sense of oneness if everybody participates and if you have economic prosperity. But at the same time, we do need to reconcile the issues of the past as well. And right now, it is now 42 years since Black July, or 37 years since 1988, the JVP revolution. We as a nation still haven't come to grips with what took place. And we don't talk about these things. Now, recently, there's been a hullabaloo about whether history needs to be taught, whether it's going to be taken out, which it is not of the curriculum. History will be taught. But we in Sri Lanka, we don't really even know what our contemporary history is. We simply don't talk about it. We don't talk about the war. We don't talk about the 88-89 JVP insurrection at all. And it's troubling, isn't it, that our nation, our society can't actually begin a conversation about the recent past. Instead, what's taught as history remains, King Vijaya and King Dutugamunu and the British and all that. But contemporary history, what you and I have been discussing, 1948, the 1960s, 71, 83, 88, 89, none of that is actually properly discussed. If you ask a teenager today, did you know there was a JVP insurrection in 1971? They will be clueless. 90% of them, I would wager, would simply not have heard about it. So why is it that we don't actually want to discuss these things?
Yeah, I agree with you that we have to know the past in order to know our history, know from where we came, and also
to ensure we don't make the same mistakes.
Right. Yes, very, very much true. And perhaps the reason is also the reason we don't go into the past, or our leaders. When we say we don't go, it's the leaders who don't go into the past, is because probably they were also involved.
Some of them, yes.
Yes. So the question of accountability comes. Because of accountability, they don't encourage going to the past. But it is something that we need to do. We need to do that. And we need to look at international examples. Other countries have also gone through terrible periods. They also have taken long periods, like in the Spanish Civil War in the 1930s and 40s, 1930s. Or now they are finding mass burial sites of that conflict in Spain. So they are also grappling almost 100 years before. So we also need to face up to that challenge. I think it's coming, in our case, it's coming also partly because the international pressure. International pressure, also diaspora pressure. People from the diaspora, they remember what happened, and they are, in a way, they are not constrained like the people in Sri Lanka are to talk about these things. In a way, it makes them also, it empowers them to have a cause to fight for. Then they can lobby in governments in the West. But it is good that I think we have to look at the diaspora positively, because what they are doing is they are forcing us to deal with something we don't really want to deal with. But it is important to deal, because unless we know the truth about our past, how to build a future? We can't build a future on lies. No, you have to know the truth, it doesn't necessarily mean we have to go on a punishing spree and all that.
It's not about prosecution. It is about learning what happened.
And I think that is the lesson we can learn from South Africa. South Africa did go into its past.
The Truth and Reconciliation Commission.
And also the atrocities committed by the whites and also by the blacks. They looked at it. They went through an accountability process, but with amnesty provisions in it also. They had discussions. From what I understand about South Africa, that's a special. They discuss these things. These things are not kept hidden. They try to discuss these matters. And like their constitution, it was much debated and discussed before being promulgated. In our country also, we have discussed constitutions at length, especially during the time of Madam Chandrika Kumaratunga, who incidentally is going to be celebrating her 80th birthday. I think during her period there was a great effort made to discuss these issues, to discuss ethnic conflict, the history, and the way forward. There was a mass campaign by the government itself to take the message to the people. Unfortunately, it was also during a time of war. The LTT was also very strong at that time, so it was difficult to take messages of peace and thinking of the other in the midst of bombs exploding, because then you get very defensive and angry and hatred comes. But now those problems are over, and I think we have a government that is actually dedicated, that wants to do something for the people, and they have their own. They are also intertwined with the past, the JVP insurrections of the past, though they don't, I think, bear direct responsibility for that because they were too young at that time. So they need to be challenged and pushed to deal with the past, and the international community is also there. They are helping us. The international community, the UN Human Rights Commissioner who was here about a month ago, he clearly said that it should be Sri Lankans who decide. Sri Lankans must make the decisions.
Absolutely.
We the internationals will support you in making those decisions, in coming to the right decisions that you will take.
After all, it is we Sri Lankans who actually live here and have to deal with life in Sri Lanka. But we need to apply some international norms, perhaps, and not try to reinvent the wheel. We need to see what other countries have done, like South Africa, Spain, Argentina, and so on. And we can learn from those countries as well, don't you think?
Yes. And also, an international presence will give confidence to the minorities, I think, because while we have a good system of justice and all that, in the end, again, decisions will be in our courts wherever the majority is Sinhalese, and that's a reality we have to deal with. So the minorities sometimes don't feel so confident that the decisions will be fair ones, or vindicate their rights. So therefore they do want to know that there will be some international presence, supervision, though I believe that in the end we must take the decisions, because as you rightly said, we are the ones who live with the decisions. So our government can only go as far as the people can accept it, and then the role for civil society is to go to the people and explain these things, to make the path easier for the government.
Right, and I'm afraid, Jehan, we'll have to leave it at that because we are out of time. My thanks to Dr. Jehan Perera, who is, of course, the Executive Director of the National Peace Council. Thank you very much for being with me this evening.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you to you at home for watching. Don't go away because the news is coming up next. Have a great evening.